Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our grant management training here with the Indian Affairs Department for our fiscal year 2021 grantees. My name is Lawrence John, and I'm the Tribal Infrastructure Fund and Capital Outlay Administrator. I recently returned back to the Indian Affairs Department back in June of this year, and I'm glad to be back. And I also have with me here this morning Secretary Lynn Trujillo, and she will be providing a welcome address to all of us. Secretary Trujillo.
Good morning. Welcome. I'm really delighted that I'm able to join you this morning. First off, I want to say congratulations. Congratulations to all of you for the hard work that you put in every single day in order to make sure that the communities that you live in and serve receive these vital dollars that go towards really important projects. And I'm really proud to work under this administration where our governor has worked very hard to ensure that more investments than in any other previous administration has gone into tribal communities to fund vital projects that all of you are working on. And yesterday I had the honor and privilege of joining leadership at Santo Domingo to celebrate with them at their groundbreaking for their beautiful new wastewater treatment plant that was funded by TIF dollars as well as capital outlay. And so I just really want to congratulate all of you guys. Thank you so much for all your hard work that you put in day out to take care of our people and our communities. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank both Lawrence and Christopher and Vanessa at ASD who work really hard every day to make sure that we provide the service that we can to all of you. So I really look forward to coming out. I think all of us in terms of the ASD team look forward to coming out and celebrating with you, going to some groundbreaking, seeing these projects as things get better. And I also want to take this opportunity to wish all of you and your families a happy holiday season and continue to take care of yourselves during this time. And we look forward to working with all of you. Thanks so much, Christopher and Lawrence, for your hard work and support from our PR coordinator, Sherry Katnack, who's helping to run stuff on the back end. So it's a real team effort at the Indian Affairs Department, and so proud of all of us and all of you. Thanks, Lawrence.
Thank you, Secretary Trujillo. And again, thank you for attending our training this morning. And we'll cover the process for the grant management. And we used to call this a kickoff orientation, and we decided to kind of change it and call it the grant management training for our grantees. So again, welcome, and let's get started. Can everyone hear me okay? And if you want to put in the chat from where you're from and what tribal organization you're representing, please feel free to do so. And at the end of this training, I also want to do a group photo. So I'm going to ask to see if we could all turn on our videos at the end of the training so we can take a group photo to utilize for our social media, saying that who attended our grant management training. So let's begin with the training. This is a grant management training for grantees for fiscal year 2021. And again, my name is Lawrence John. I'm the TIF and Capital Outlay Administrator with the Indian Affairs Department. And what I do is basically manage and provide technical assistance to all the grantees for both TIF and Capital Outlay. The next slide is kind of an overview of the training topics that we're going to discuss this morning. We're going to talk about understanding the grant agreement, the purpose and the intent of the grant agreement, and also know what it basically covers in terms of once you do receive the grant agreement. We'll also cover the appropriation types, of what type of appropriations and how different they are between TIF and capital outlay. And then we'll also go over the allowable expense of what you can and cannot do in terms of expending funds on your grant agreement and towards your project. And we'll also cover the scope of work in the budget forum to kind of go over what is needed and the reason behind the scope of work and the budget form, in addition to the notice of obligation. The notice of obligation is a very important document that is needed in order to commence your project for both TIF and capital outlay. We also cover the expenditures, basically, what is needed to submit your reimbursements to our office. And then we also will cover reporting. Reporting is very important for any grants that you receive. Reporting is required. And with TIF and capital outlay projects, reporting is required by the state on a monthly basis. In addition to that, we also will go over reversions. If you do have a reversion on your grant, these are the steps taken to do a reversion back to the state. And then finally, we'll do the final report, basically just looking at the final report and what is needed. And then lastly, we will go over the acronyms. It's very important to know the acronyms that we speak on a daily basis, to know what we're talking, to know what is being said. For example, CPMS, what is CPMS? We'll go over those acronyms. It's just like a little helpful tool to have. And then we'll finish out with reminders and other information. And if you have any questions, please put your questions in the chat box, and we'll get to those questions at the end of the training session. So let's begin. When you receive a grant agreement, it's very important to review and read the grant agreement. I remember when I first started with Indian Affairs Department, I had to sit down and read the grant agreement. And it's 16 pages of reading. And those 16 pages were very helpful to me to understand the grant agreement, what it means, the intent, the purpose of it, and why there is a grant agreement between the entity and the state. The IGA, as we call it, is an agreement between the entity and the Indian Affairs Department. The IGA, when you read it, it does provide the project description and a dollar amount. And some dollar amounts may be different because the different requests are different throughout each tribe. Each tribe has a different request, so those dollar amounts will be different within the IGA. As you know, once the IGA is issued, you have to obligate at least 5% of the appropriation within the first 6 months of the IGA when it's executed. But before that happens, you also have to do a bond questionnaire. When a bond questionnaire, I think all of you have done a bond questionnaire, and that's very important because those bond questionnaires are important to submit to the State Board of Finance. And once the State Board of Finance receives your bond questionnaire, then the bonds can be sold. If you do not fill out a bond questionnaire before the deadline date, then your bond questionnaire won't be accepted, and you would have to wait until the next time the bonds are sold. And the bonds are sold in June and December. So if you get appropriation, let's say, for example, this coming January, the bonds will be sold for that specific project in June. But if you miss the deadline in June, then you would have to wait until that coming December of 2022. There's another slide here that I want to show is basically the grant agreement. So this is the grant agreement, and it's kind of very small, but I know that all of you, have copies of the grant agreement. It kind of basically tells you the information about the grant agreement, whether it's plan, design, construct, refurbish, renovate, and also if it's like a purchase, to purchase a vehicle, purchase equipment, materials, etc. And it's very important to read the appropriation language, the title of the project, and also to really highlight, I would recommend to highlight the reversion date of the grant agreement. So that's kind of like, information that you need to know and understand in the grant agreement. And it's very important to read the grant agreement. I really highly recommend that you sit down with your team, project managers, and go over the grant agreement and read it. Maybe someone can read one page and another person can read the second page. So to kind of get an understanding of the grant agreement, so you know what the intent is. The next slide is appropriation types. There's two types of grants that we work with here in the Indian Affairs Department. One is the TIF IGA. And with TIF, it's a lot different than capital outlay. For TIF, planning projects, must be completed within 24 months. And 24 months is, 2 years once the IGA is executed. For design and construction projects, those must be completed within 36 months or 3 years from the date of the execution by the Cabinet Secretary. Any unexpended funds reverts back to the severance tax bond fund. So any balances that you may have at the end of your project, let's say, for example, a penny, that can be reverted back to the severance tax bond fund. The other type is the capital outlay. The capital outlay is identified in the capital bill, and it also provides the reversion date of the appropriation. So it's very important, again, to read the reversion date within your intergovernmental grant agreement. With capital outlay, there's 4 years for plan, design, construct, demolish, renovate, refurnish, and 2 years for purchases, such as if you're going to purchase a motor grader, a vehicle, or any type of equipment. So those are the types of appropriations for TIF and capital outlay. The next slide is the allowable expense. Allowable expense is basically what you're going to spend towards the project. It's a direct project costs that are allowed. You also have indirect projects that you have that you think that you might purchase within your grant agreement, but some of it may not be allowed. For example, you cannot buy coffee or donuts for a meeting because you're going to be talking about that project. That's a disallowable expense. The funds have to go directly to the project itself. You also have to go by the scope of work that was submitted to our office along with the IGA. So it's really, again, important to read the IGA, the appropriation language, and also to follow your scope of work. If you go outside of the scope of work and say, for example, you were appropriated funds for a warehouse, but yet in your scope of work is that you're going to build a warehouse. However, someone wanted to build a swimming pool. That is basically a disallowable expense. The tribe would have to spend its own funds or seek other funding to build a swimming pool. But the intent here is basically to build the warehouse for that specific purpose. Another information to have, which is a very useful tool, is the disbursement rule. And I can provide a copy of the disbursement rule to all of you. It's a very good guidance. I use it all the time, and it really does tell you what you can and cannot do. So that's a very good, useful tool to have, is the State Board of Finance disbursement rule. And I'd be happy to send a copy to each and every one of you and to review, and it's a really good document to have. The next slide is the forms that we utilize once the grant agreement is issued to the tribes. We always attach the scope of work and the budget form with the IGA. Once the IGA is sent to the tribal leadership then reviews the IGA, and then who's ever responsible for this project will fill out the scope of work. And in the scope of work, when we identify certain areas that need to be filled out, which is important. The one important part of the scope of work form is way at the bottom, the contact information. It's very important to fill that out because, if we have a question about your project, then we know who to contact. We know who to email and get in contact with that person at that project. Sometimes, we have to go through the whole project and folder and kind of look and see who's responsible. So the scope of work form really does help us to identify who to work with. And on the other side is the budget form. This basically kind of gives you an idea of how to fill out your budget forms, where you're going to be spending funds in terms of the project. And also keep in mind that every budget form needs to be signed. So it's basically saying you're attesting to the budget form, and this is what the budget will look like when the project will begin. The next slide is the notice of obligation. The notice of obligation is very important to know the process for. The notice of obligation basically commences the project. If you do not have a notice of obligation and you start working on the project and start receiving expenditures, invoices from the project, we cannot reimburse you for that. You have to have a notice of obligation in place first. When you submit a notice of obligation to our office, it's important to provide documentation or supporting documents to your notice of obligation form. A third-party agreement, can be signed by the contractor, and also documentation how the third-party agreement was procured, such as copies of bids, quotes, proposals, copies of RFPs, copies of public notice, scoring. That really does help us in reviewing the notice of obligation requests. And also that once we receive the notice of obligation and we review it and everything is okay, then we sign and date and send back to the grantee. Once it's sent back to the grantee, then you can start working with your vendor on the project in terms of starting the project and also starting your kickoff meeting. And that's when the vendor starts working and submitting invoices to the tribe. So it's very important to have a notice of obligation in place first before you start expending any funds. So please keep that in mind. If you have a question about a notice of obligation, please contact our office. We'll be happy to help you to go over the form with you and what is needed. So, so it's very important to have this notice of obligation. And I do have on the next slide a copy of that notice of obligation. This is a notice of obligation form. I can send one to you, or you can download one off the DFA website. But basically, the notice of obligation has different sections that you need to fill out. You need to fill out the contract number, the vendor, the contract amount, and the termination date and reversion date. Basically, the reversion date is the reversion date of the IGA, and the grant number needs to be in there as well. And if you go to that paragraph, that second paragraph, where it has a 19XXX, please be careful and to ensure that that number matches the grant agreement on top, because sometimes I receive notice of obligations with two different grant agreement numbers on there. So I would have to call or email and say, hey, which is the correct one? And then you go down to your vendor and your contract. You put that information, the vendor's name there, and the amount that was agreed upon. And then also, if you go further down, this part kind of gets kind of confusing for people. On the grant amount, you put the grant amount of what is appropriated where Sherry has the arrow. The next line is basically the agreement that was made. Sherry, can you go back? Okay, thank you. The next line is the amount that's on the third-party agreement. And that amount goes on the second line. The third, if it's your first notice of obligation, keep that as a 0, and then just bring down the contract amount at the bottom line. So if you're filling out a notice of obligation for number 2, then it gets kind of confusing, and some people get confused with this where they put in a different amount. So it's really important to keep on top of your notice of obligations. So if this is your notice of obligation for number 2 and the amount, let's say for example, the first notice of obligation is for $50,000 and it's signed and approved and sent back, and then you requested another obligation for $40,000. So that $50,000 plus the $40,000 comes up to $90,000. So you would have $50,000 on the third line and $40,000 on the second line, and then you would add those two and it comes up to $90,000. But keep in mind to have your notice of obligation within your appropriation amount. So it's a very simple form, and it also can be downloaded off the DFA website, and we can be happy to send a copy of the notice of obligation form to you. And I do have a template form that you can go off of. And I know that when you download off the DFA website, it has that yellow marking, and you can take off the yellow marking if you want. Just scroll the whole document and then just click on the white or the blank icon there, and it removes the yellow marking. So that's basically the notice of obligation form. And please keep in mind that you need a notice of obligation form before you commence your project. If you don't have a notice of obligation form, and you submitted reimbursement, we cannot reimburse you for those expenses. The next slide is the expenditures. This is very important when you're submitting a request for payment to our office. We do have a checklist that we go by, and we encourage everyone to check off what they're submitting to our office. And we do have a sample form here on our PowerPoint. It's basically a check form that you check off, and you submit that with your request for payment form. And everything that's included with the request for payment form is once you submit your reimbursement, is the checklist, the request for payment form, the invoices, the front and back copy of the check that was issued, or the ACH. If you're doing ACH, make sure you highlight or underline where the funds have been withdrawn from the vendor or has been paid to the vendor. And also, you need a copy of your CPMS report, and the notice of obligations form needs to be attached to the RFP. And that is basically the request for payment package that needs to be submitted to our office. If your invoices do not match the request for payment form, we will reject, and we will send you an email saying, can you please double check to see if this is correct? Because usually sometimes they forget to submit an invoice, or either that when scanning, they didn't catch it. So just to be careful once you submit, to make sure that all the invoices are attached. Everything is attached before sending to our office. This is a copy of the request for payment form. If you do not have a copy, please let us know, and then we can definitely send you a copy to you so you can utilize. And this is a copy of the request for payment. And the reason why I put this form up there is because, as you know, like maybe 4 years ago, we used to do a notary. That became very tedious in terms of trying to find a notary. A lot of times, a lot of the payments would be held up because of lack of notary, or if the notary was on leave, or for some reason, it was kind of hard to obtain a notary. So what the DFA decided to do is to take out the notary section and just have the grantee representative and the grantee official sign the RFP, which made it a lot easier, a lot easier. So utilize the new form, but I wanted to show this example. But if you do want a copy of the new request for payment form, then please let us know, and we'd be happy to send you one. Reporting. Reporting is very important. Like I said, any grant agreement that you receive, whether it be state, federal, or tribal, you have to report your activities with the grant. And it's good business practice to do, because you have an idea of where the project is, you have an idea of where what's been done in terms of the project management, and what's been spent and what hasn't been spent and what the balance is. So it's really important to know that you have to report your activities once you receive a grant agreement. For reporting, like I said, here's an acronym, CPMS. It's the Capital Projects Monitoring System, which is a web-based system for reporting and monitoring. It's monitored by the Division of Finance Administration, or DFA. And every month you log into CPMS and you provide an update on your project on the 30th day of each month, or you can provide, before the 30th, maybe on the 28th or 29th, it's all dependent upon you. But you have to submit a report to kind of give an update report in the CPMS portal. And what we do on our end is that we also have to do an update quarterly report for CPMS. So we go in and we update every project that we have. And it's like over 100 projects that we have to update and submit our report to DFA on a quarterly basis. So reporting is very important. So when you log on to CPMS, this is what comes up the dashboard. And you have to log on with your username and password. If you have a new staff member coming aboard within your department, please let me know, and I can provide you information of the person who is responsible in providing the username and password. Her name is Sarah De La Rosa. She's with the Capital Outlay Bureau under the Division of Finance Administration, and I can send you information on her contact information, her phone number, and her email. So you can just send her a quick email, say, hey, Sarah, we have a new staff member, and the staff member is going to also help me do reporting, and he or she's going to be updating the CPMS portal on a monthly basis. And the other is basically the data reporting from the tribes, and this is kind of an example of what needs to be reported on a monthly basis. With CPMS, you also have to fill out the bottom portion of the report, and that bottom portion of the CPMS needs to be submitted with your request for payment, which is a requirement by DFA that you have to do. If you have a question on that, I'll be happy to help you in terms of filling out that bottom portion of the CPMS reporting. And moving right along, we have the final report. And if you could click one more time, Sherry. Thank you. This is the final report form. Before, it was called the quarterly report, and I knew that a lot of the tribes would submit the quarterly report to our office. And that's been done away with, and they decided just to do the final report. The final report, it needs to be submitted with your final request for payment. And it's an easy form to fill out, and all you do is just fill out the basic information. And what's most important is basically the project amount and the grant balance. If you have a grant balance of 0, great. We're really glad that you expended the full amount of the grant. And then at the bottom, just check off the final report, put down your name and your title and the date, and attach that to your RFP payment saying, this is our final report for this project, and we've expended all our funds, which is leaves a 0 balance. However, if you do have a remaining balance, let's say of maybe $10, that $10 will be put down where it says grant balance. And so, and also on your RFP would reflect the $10. I'm saying there's a $10 balance, and this would also reflect the $10. And on the next slide is the reversion letter. And this would also reflect the $10 of what was expended. So the RFP request form, the final report form, and this reversion letter form would all reflect the $10. If you had a $10, balance that you didn't expend, so all those 3 numbers would have to match. And this is a reversion letter. We can definitely send this to you and keep as a copy for your files. If you have a reversion on your project, you can just fill out this information and sign it and date it and send it back to us. The next slide is acronyms. I thought this was something that we all need to know. Speaking acronym language, for example, the RFP is request for payment, and you can also mean request for proposal. But I've learned that the RFP is basically the request for payment. The notice of obligations, the NO, DFA, Division of Finance Administration, CPMS, Capital Projects Monitoring System, the ICIP, which is the Infrastructure Capital Improvements Projects. And there's also the Arts in the Public Place, which is AIPP, your scope of work, and the types of funding sources, which is a severance tax bond, which is also in your grant agreement, and the general fund. It's also can be in your grant agreement if your project is being funded by the general fund funds. Also, this can also be in your grant agreement, a general obligation bond, the GOB. And then reauthorizations. Reauthorizations are very important to know, especially the process. If you feel that your project is running out of time, the legislature is coming into session next month, you can definitely meet with your state legislatures and request for reauthorization, either to repurpose the project or to extend your project for maybe perhaps another year. If you get extended for another year, then a new IGA amendment would be issued indicating that this project is extended for one more year. So it's really important to understand and know the reauthorization. And they do have the reauthorization forms on the state legislature website. So you can go there and read about the process for the reauthorization. And then we have TIF and capital outlay. So those are just kind of acronyms that we work with on a daily basis. And I wanted to let you know, in case I speak this language, that you would that you would know what I'm talking about. And we're almost done with this training. Just little reminders. Funding is only available after the bonds are sold through the State Board of Finance. Again, 5% obligation. Once you receive your grant agreement, you have to go by the grant agreement, which does spell out in the grant agreement about the 5%. Sometimes if you don't meet the 5% or the 6 months, we usually always contact the tribes, and through an obligation letter, Secretary Trujillo would write a letter to tribal leadership and saying, when this project hasn't been obligated, please provide us an expenditure plan to see when a notice of obligation will be submitted regarding this project, because we want to work with you on the projects to push it, to move it forward, and to ensure that it's a very successful project. Again, CPMS is also reporting the 30th of each month, so that's coming up pretty quick. It's coming up on Thursday, December 30th, so just keep that in mind. And when you're updating, include a short narrative in your updates, and also print a copy for your backup. If you want to print a copy for your backup, there's like a little line on the dashboard where it says printable format. Just click on that and they'll give you a PDF version, and then you can download and save to your desktop, and then just send us a copy for it, and we can place that in your project folder. The last slide is other information that you need to know. Just again, a capital outlay bill may be passed in any legislative session, and projects are funded through the severance tax bonds proceeds. Records are retained for 6 years following project completion, so we have those records. And if you're having a kickoff meeting, just let us know. If you want us to attend, let us know. We'll be happy to attend the kickoff meeting to start the projects. And those are always exciting to attend, because that the project is going to be starting and work is going to start on the project. So it's very exciting to know that the projects are being started. The other is also we do on-site visits during the course of the project activities. So if you want us to come out and look at our project, where it's at, what's been done, what the timelines are, please let us know, and we'll be happy to come out and visit with you and to see the project. And the purpose of these visits is basically just to monitor the progress that is being made and to verify that the work is in accordance with the grant and state requirements. And our last slide is questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself, and I'm happy to answer your questions. If there is no questions, I would like to do a group photo. If you could unlock your video, and then Sherry can take a picture, and then we usually try to put our activities on social media to say that this is what's going on with the Indian Affairs Department. So if you could do that, I would really appreciate it, and to know that all of you attend the grant management training. And it's also good to see faces, to see who I would like to meet. Hey, Lori. Hey, Victoria. Hey, Sybil. It's good to see all of you. Hey, Merle. Who else? Sherry, is that good?
Yeah, that looks like everyone who's going to turn it on. I'll take a picture right now. Everybody okay. Say cheese.
Cheese. We have 2 latecomers.
I think I got everybody. Let me take one more.
Okay.
Everybody smile. Got it.
Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you, everyone.
So, to kind of wrap up the training, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to our office. My contact information is on the PowerPoint, which I'll be happy to send to all of you, and the forms that are attached to this presentation. And also, if you have questions on your request for payment, please contact Vanessa Gutierrez. She handles all the requests for payments. And this concludes our training. I just want to say thank you for all of you who registered. It's good to see your faces. And I wanted to wish you and your family a very Merry Christmas and a very safe and happy New Year. And I hope and pray that 2022 will be better and to kind of get back together and to see everyone in person. Again, thank you for attending a training. I really do appreciate all of you and excited about the projects that you were appropriated funds for, and looking forward to the beginning of the project and to the very end of the project. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Lord.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.